Hi everyone, I'm Hayne and welcome to the channel where we talk about horror and how it can be used to help process the things happening in your head and the world at large. Today we're going to be talking about another cult classic that doesn't get nearly the love that it deserves. Dee Snider's Strangeland. In 1998, regular home access to the internet was still a relatively new thing, and it wasn't nearly as common as it is now. Back then, people were still pretty naive to the possibilities that presented, both good and bad. But for the most part, everybody was really excited to be able to connect to the rest of the world from the comfort of their own home, especially teenagers. Two such teens, Genevieve and Tiana, strike up a conversation with a guy by the username of Captain Howdy in a chat room. He seems really cool and wants them to come to a party. Unfortunately, online stranger danger wasn't really taken seriously back then, and these girls learned the hard way that people online have a tendency to lie. When the girls are found to still be gone the next morning, Genevieve's dad, Detective Mike Gage, starts searching for them with his partner Christian. Mike is woefully ignorant of the ways of the internet, and it takes a conversation with his niece, Angela, to make him realize that his daughter has met with people she found online before. We catch a glimpse of Captain Howdy as he starts preparing piercing equipment, lamenting the fact that the young are no longer required to participate in rites of passage. He believes strongly that there cannot be a real transition into adulthood without some sort of initiation. As he pierces the soft portion of his own forearm, he states that this ritual must be painful, and it must leave a mark. Tiana's car is found submerged, and in its trunk is her tortured, lifeless body. It's later revealed that her death was the result of a birth defect, and that the torture caused her to have a heart attack. Alongside her is their first real clue, a massive piece of body jewelry for a septum. At the time, body modification didn't have nearly the acceptance it does now, so it narrowed down the search. They go to an alternative club suggested to them for leads, but have no idea what they're actually looking for at this point, so they miss Howdy despite the fact that he's just in the other room being suspended. But we get to see a cameo from Bile on stage, so that's awesome. Back at the police station, Christian gets records of Genevieve's most recent online activity, showing that she had been having a conversation with Captain Howdy. Anyone notice that Exorcist reference yet? Anyway. Mike gets Angela to come to the station, and she's able to find Howdy online, but Howdy realizes the profile that she's helped them make is fake and gives them a party invitation to a wrong address, resulting in an elderly couple getting swatted. A distraught Mike sleeps in his car at the scene of the failed swatting and starts getting taunting voice messages from Captain Howdy. He realizes that the background noise he's hearing outside of his car matches the background noise he hears in Howdy's voice messages, and is able to figure out what house he's in from there. Mike discovers a full-blown house of horrors with multiple victims inside, all undergoing some form of ongoing torture. Mike takes Howdy down and rescues his daughter, all while Howdy openly alludes to having essayed Genevieve and continues to taunt Mike by saying he's never been afraid a day of his life because he wishes he was dead. Mike releases Genevieve and escorts her out before calling in what just happened and getting the other victims rescued. Howdy goes to trial and is found by the court to be insane. He's sent to a mental institution where over the course of 4 years he's properly medicated, genuinely remorseful, and seemingly wants to live a quiet, meek life under his birth name, Carlton Hendricks. His release is met with a large public outcry, and a group of parents decide that he hasn't properly paid for his crimes, which is rich coming from Freddy Krueger. They decide to take matters into their own hands. Mike sees them abduct Carlton. Carlton sees Mike see them abduct him, and Mike does absolutely nothing. The parents think they kill Carlton. Unfortunately for them, that is not the case, and in the process of dragging him off, they destroyed his medication. So, they just tried to kill him, he's off his meds, and just like that, Howdy's back. After capturing and torturing the parents' vigilante club, it's revealed that Howdy has also kidnapped an already extremely traumatized Genevieve for a second time, when he decides to have a video chat with Mike and his wife, torturing their daughter on camera. The new round of victims are discovered by the police when suspicious activity in a building is reported. As the victims are being loaded into ambulances and the scene is being investigated, Mike discovers a matchbook from the now defunct Alternative Club, immediately letting him know where Howdy is. He doesn't share this information, hoping to confront Howdy alone. Despite the fact that Christian follows him, he gets his wish and ultimately ends up killing Howdy, suspending him by chains and then lighting him on fire. The entire club is engulfed, and Mike seems relieved as he goes to join his family. Let's talk about the two most obvious points first and where they converge: masochism and sadism. Howdy doesn't just like pain, he practically worships it. If there's nothing else in this world that he loves, it's pain. It is his single driving force in life. We may not love it as much as he does, but we can all be a little masochistic at times. There are 4 flavors of pain lovers. The first and most obvious is sexual masochism, those who get intimate gratification from it. Up next is psychological masochism, where one enjoys their own mental distress or torment. Coming in third is moral masochism, where more often than not people will use their pain as a way to alleviate their guilt by self-sacrificing or acting altruistically in order to benefit others to their own detriment. Number 4 is a more newly recognized type called adaptive masochism, where someone enjoys temporary pain for delayed gratification later, kind of like a reward system. At some point in our lives, we've all fallen into one of these categories, even if we don't take it to an extreme. Now let's talk about masochism's best friend, sadism. Captain Howdy believes strongly that no one can be the most evolved version of themselves without experiencing pain, and he's taken it upon himself to be their guide through that experience. Like masochism, there are 4 types of sadism. Spineless sadism is basically the school bully of the types that is deeply insecure and has to hurt others in order to feel superior. People with tyrannical sadism seek out positions of authority in order to harm others. Enforcing sadism likes to take a moral standpoint with the hurt that they bestow upon others by causing pain to those that they feel are somehow morally inferior. And where would social media be without our last type? Explosive sadism. These people are reactionary and they're prone to furious outbursts. People have built entire careers on this last type. As opposite as these two things may seem, Captain Howdy somehow exists in a place where they meet in the middle. Sadomasochism can be used as an umbrella term to cover both topics during a conversation, but it can also be used to describe somebody that is both a sadist and a masochist at the same time. There's no doubt that Howdy receives gratification from giving and receiving pain, but what I find more interesting is the weird mix of moral masochism and enforcing sadism that we see in him. He sees his actions as helping his victims to become the best versions of themselves, all the while looking down on them for not meeting his level in a spiritual sense. So long as it remains legal, safe, sane, and consensual, sadomasochism can be practiced in non-problematic ways. It's when they go outside of those parameters that it becomes a problem and help should be sought out. Those of us that get tattooed and pierced do so for a million different reasons, and they all have one commonality. It's an aesthetic choice that we make to reflect who we are, and everybody does that to some extent, whether it's what they choose to do with their hair or the clothing that they wear. What Captain Howdy does goes way beyond that, actually harming himself in order to transcend the limitations of his physical body. Howdy became obsessed with transforming himself into the idealized version of who he was in his head. He handled it in an astoundingly unhealthy way, but it does happen in real life. Body dysmorphia is when someone develops a fixation with something that they feel is wrong with their body, and it can present itself in a number of ways. Sometimes people don't like their nose and get rhinoplasty. Sometimes they feel they were assigned the wrong gender at birth and go on to get gender-affirming care. But sometimes it gets dark. like when people fixate on their weight and end up developing eating disorders. In dealing with body dysmorphia, there is a line between self-validation and self-harm, and it often takes the outside perspective of loved ones and mental health care professionals to distinguish where that line is, because the flaw in the person's mind becomes so real that they simply can't see past it. It's hard to imagine a character in Strangeland that probably didn't end up with post-traumatic stress disorder or complex PTSD, and Genevieve definitely got the worst of it. 4 years later, she was still waking up screaming and crying, having nightmares about Captain Howdy, showing that she was having a difficult time adjusting to her life after her abduction. And then the second time that she was rescued, she had no reaction to the officers, despite the fact that she was actively being tortured. She just had a 1,000-yard stare that signified she was in a dissociative state, which is common in people with PTSD as a coping mechanism. Even Howdy shows signs of trauma. Not as the captain, but as Carlton. After therapy and the medication seems to have taken effect, he's a far more timid, mousy man than he used to be. And he struggles to even look at himself in the mirror when he's removing the makeup that covers up the tattoos on his face, clearly disturbed by the person that he used to be. If you're alive and breathing, it's reasonable to assume that you have some form of trauma. Everybody does. But what separates that from PTSD and CPTSD is the extreme reaction that's evoked in the person that lives with it. Now, therapy and support groups are the best way to handle this, but there are certain practices that you can pick up to sort of aid them along. Figuring out what triggers a response and coming up with a game plan on how to handle those situations is not fun, and it's not easy, but it does give you a baseline to work from. Meditation techniques can help you to clear your mind. Grounding techniques can help to sort of bring you back to yourself when you're having a crisis. And coming up with a daily routine can give you a sense of security that you need to feel safe. Strangeland is one of those movies that it's either not for you or you really love it. And I hope that you give it a chance. It's currently streaming on Tubi. Thank you for watching, and live in fear.